I'm Adrian Bloom. I'm Senior Manager of Online Platforms at NBC Group, a broadcasting company in the Middle East.
My name is Janus Boy. I'm from Denmark. I founded a company 11 years ago called J-Boy. We do networked knowledge in action, which is mostly user groups and conferences.
And I don't think mine's working. It's okay. And I'm Mike Johnson. I'm the editor for CMS Critic, which is a website that covers content management industry.
Fantastic. Well, I think no one would disagree that content management in itself has changed over the past 5 years. There's also a definition of content management that has also been altered with the more humanistic and more honest way of communicating the value of products in terms like customer experience management and web experience management. I'd like to ask each of you, just for a moment, give me your perspective of how content management in general has changed, and where do you think we're going?
It's working now, but thank you. I like how everyone dumped that one on me quickly. How has it changed? Well, I've been doing it since about 2006, paying attention to the industry. And what I've seen has been the shift from your standard everyday CMS platform that's basically get in, edit content, push out pages, and manage multiple websites. And it's moved into more, you've started to see companies pick up lots of acquisitions, and we've seen marketing and suite integrations, email marketing put in. Web personalization has obviously become a big thing. Newsletter integration, integrated analytics, and so on and so forth. So it seems to be that a lot of the big boys are really starting to push the suite solution, which, and I think it was very interesting earlier when I believe it was Pascal was doing his bit where he showed the TV dinner, which I thought was a very good reference point for that, because it's very much true. You're gonna buy one thing and expect all those components, and none of which are the true focus of the company, to be equally as solid. And I think that's a mistake that a lot of people have been making. I've seen in a lot of the conferences I've attended, I've watched companies like Adobe, for instance, push their products, all of which, most of them have come in from acquisitions, obviously down the road. But I think when you're packaging everything together, you're not taking advantage of technologies that are out there that have a larger focus. Google Analytics, for instance, a really strong analytics platform, yet for some reason people seem to continue to think that developing a new analytics platform is a good idea when there's already a great one out there. So, over the years, that's basically where things have been shifting to, and now here we are talking about personalization in Magnolia. So I'm interested to see how you guys are going to end up tackling that, and whether you're going to, who you think is going to be your best integration points, and go from there, really.
At this point, I'd like to also ask one of our technicians just to transition a slide for us, if you don't mind. If somebody could just pop over there real quick. We'll actually show a picture of this concert of applications. But please continue.
All right, so I think there's three things. I'll go a little bit briefer. I'll just say mobile, of course, is a big change. Also with Magnolia and the new user interface, iPads, smartphones has been a big change in the industry in the last couple of years. Another change from the vendor perspective is also that we now have at least one vendor that has a chief visionary officer. Curious to see where that would lead us in coming years. And then last but not least, I think customers have learned. Customers have learned much slower than I expected, but they have learned, and I think are now better able to tell the differences between agencies and between CMSs, and so I think that holds great promise for the future.
Just to add my perspective to it, and just to say right off the bat, I once thought maybe I should start a website and blog about CMSs, and in my very cynical way, and call it CMS Cynic as sort of a contrast to CMS Critic, which is much too polite in many ways.
You can blog on mine anytime.
So my slightly cynical point of view about this is that when we started out with content management, basically forgetting the whole past of enterprise content management, document management, which had been going on for quite a while. But we were all these young guys starting in this completely new greenfield technology, and we just needed something to manage pages. It was just getting a hassle to do this in HTML. So you start building these systems to manage those pages for you, to make it easy to publish them out, and in the meantime you start debating the whole theory behind it. So I think around 2000, when there was a bit of a crash in the whole online thing, that sort of coincided with a lot of people being very theoretical about managing content, separating the content from the design, separating it from the business process, separating it from the workflow, creating these ideal, beautiful, abstract systems that would do all of this in a complete separation, giving you total flexibility to publish it out in any channel. Which at the time, of course, meant that any slide discussing this would say you can publish it on multiple websites and on paper and through SMS. So at that time, it didn't really sink in that this would be a thing, but people were already thinking through theory. However, at the same time, when it started crawling back up, people started en masse choosing systems that were just really easy to implement, because it was still a struggle to get those pages out there. And everybody knew who came in after the .com bubble burst started sort of reinventing the wheel, coming up with these solutions. And then you come at a stage where you realize that even though WordPress is very easy to run a small site on, and that you can very quickly get it up and running, and it has a really nice interface, and now we have to go mobile. And sort of go, oh, well, we can sort of do another style sheet and call it responsive and say that this is an actual strategy. And of course, a bunch of sort of the old guard are sort of going, see, I told you so, this is really useful to debate this for all of this time in a really theoretical way. In the meantime, though, I think, and this is my main worry right now, that a lot of the vendors, and I've always been on the buy side, the user side, I've never been working for a software company trying to build these products, so I realize this must be really hard to build a viable business out of this, but the tack that many companies are now taking is, so we have to compete to something that's really easy to use, and we have to make it more enterprisey and worth a high license fee, and the way to do this is adding in more stuff, which is the kind of stuff that often is very, very far from best of breed, and it's sort of like a loose attempt at something that everybody else out there is doing much, much better. So to me, the big risk is that CMS companies lose their focus because it's not seen as sexy to market a content management system. The term CMS has been laden by many projects as people see it as something that is really hard and expensive to implement. And because of that, they are taking this direction where they're spreading their efforts in creating more little features instead of focusing on a core competency, because at a media company, I just want something that manages content really, really well. And everything else outside of this that has to add on to this, etc., I want to integrate it with it. Those two things is what a CMS needs to do for me. And I'm not running a mom and pop site where it's nice that it also does email marketing, because it will do it terribly, etc.
So I think that rather than what's happened to CMS, I'll just start by giving you the 10-second summary of my 45-minute presentation, unless you want me to do the entire thing, which is that there is an indisputable and inescapable need now to, in one way or another, face up to the customer expectations for experience management, that is for superior, outstanding, and above all, consistent experiences across the web and other touch points and channels as well. And so that's why we're talking about this move from web content management to customer experience management. And then what do the vendors do in order to respond to that? So I'll speak to this for a second because it's got my company's name on it. And this appeared in a report that it's appeared in a couple of our reports. I don't want to endorse this 100%, or let me just provide a few disclaimers here. This is not exhaustive, so we say this is selected elements of a customer experience management software ecosystem. The boxes are not meant to be representative of the importance of any one of those elements, and so on and so forth, so keep that in mind. It's also not representative because what elements in that larger ecosystem of applications your company needs are dependent upon what you're trying to do and what you already have in-house and what skills you have, and et cetera, et cetera. However, we do think that web content management is at the center for a number of reasons. And I like to emphasize web content management rather than CMS, so WCM rather than CMS, which sounds like a terminological debate, but only because when we started managing content, when we started managing web content, and that's what we needed a web content management system for, that was probably the first time that most companies were creating and managing purely digital assets. That is document management, which had been around for decades and had pretty good software solutions already in the mid-90s. Mostly that was ultimately turned into print. It was thought of as preparing assets for print output or for reverse print output, like laser output to disk or scanning of printed documents and so forth. And here you were creating stuff that was always only going to exist in a digital format for the web only initially. And that practice, creating, managing, knowing what to do with, and keeping control of digital assets is precisely right at the core of customer experience management, insofar as most, but not all, of customer experience management is about digital interactions or supporting offline interactions with digital assets and so forth. And so about the suite versus best of breed debate, I'll just say that, I agree with what Mike and the others have said. However, I have argued, and so in all honesty, I have to own up to that argument, that again, for some organizations, and it always depends upon your company and your needs, it might make sense to go to a vendor that has, say, offers WCM and DAM and email marketing and some kind of analytics platform and maybe some kind of personalization services, not because all of those things should be rolled up into WCM and they've now turned it into this monster, but that they offer WCM and these other elements. And why might that be a potential benefit? Because the hardest thing now is to get started with customer experience management, to just break out of the routine of treating the web and email and social and offline and customer support as separate channels, and to start doing those in some integrated way. And if the way in order to break out of that routine is to buy into a package that kind of kickstarts you, and you don't have to worry about the integrations of various best-of-breed tools, that might be worth it. Now, probably pretty quickly, hopefully, you're going to come up to speed, and then you'll need to think seriously about, okay, what are the elements that I really need? And maybe I should be using a best-of-breed analytics tool rather than the one that I bought from the vendor whose core competency is WCM.
I think that's actually quite a good springboard. You saw today from Boris's presentation, our strategy at Magnolia honestly is to create a very flexible framework so that you can plug tools in and out. There is no single customer experience management or WCM mechanism that will integrate and easily provide in a single suite of offerings one invoice to pay. Frankly, there's so much innovation that's happening in the VC community with new tools, and there are smaller companies that are outpacing traditional companies like Eloqua and Marketo with new solutions that are simpler to use by an individual who may have just graduated from high school or college. And frankly, that's also, I think I would like to wrap that in, is that the expectation that we have from a implementation could be now centered in the marketing department rather than just the pure IT division of a company. So the tool suite needs to be open, and you need to be able to integrate and quickly validate whatever new solution might pop in that gives you some new mobile analytical platform or analytical capability. That has to be so flexible and so intuitive that that could be tested, validated, and or excluded into a more of maybe an application or an open suite type approach as we've tried to promote. And some of the things we've done at the conference are just evidence of that. We certainly don't have all the answers as it relates to customer experience management, but having a platform that will easily adapt to whatever might appear in the industry is really kind of the core focus. This kind of brings us into another bit of customer experience management. I heard, and I'm going to repeat a quote that I've heard multiple times, which is develop for mobile first. As it relates to customer experience management, you have any opinions on that quote and how it might relate to the WCM and experience management ecosystem?
I'll jump on that really quick, actually, because Tim and I just had a conversation about it where we were talking about the fact that it seemed like initially when mobile was kind of the big push, everybody was rushing out to develop all these apps. And one of the things we were saying is that things have started to change. It's moved from bringing in a developer in-house to start working on an app for iPhone, working on an app for Android, and then there's 19,000 different Android phones, tablets, God knows what's out there, Google Glass, everything is just being developed like mad. So how do you develop a single app, or even, you've got a developer that should have been working on your primary platform who's now been, his attention's been diverted and he's working on, okay, I got to get an iOS one, I need to get an Android one out. And BlackBerry, if they don't fall even further than they are now, I've got to work on them too, right? And Windows Phone, if they ever come out of somewhere, God knows where, that's going to be an issue for them as well. It's gone from, I think personally anyways, a focus on creating specific apps for mobile to rather you're designing your solution, you're thinking of your entire solution as a whole, and it's where can I take it regardless of what device I have. So you're using HTML5 technology, you're using CSS3, and you're making sure that regardless of how it scales, the experience is going to be consistent across the platforms. So it's not just customer experience isn't necessarily just customer experience. It's customer experience and the people that are using your product day to day. It should be cohesive, I think, across the board, right? You don't just want to have your front end really adaptive across all the different devices, but the back end and how you get that content out there, it needs to be really fluid, and it doesn't matter if you have to pick up your phone to make a quick change because you made a spelling mistake or a translation's incorrect, or you need to push something through your workflow system, and then being able to save that, and then you sit down at your desktop and continue on from where you left off without having to upload it, I think the whole experience in general has gone back to focusing more on the web technologies themselves rather than just an app solution. That's what I'm seeing anyway.
It might be interesting to take NBC's perspective and discuss what your concept and your perception of app development is versus experience in web development, just from a customer standpoint.
Well, there's only one simple way of describing it, which is it's a huge struggle because we are actually developing native apps for iOS and Android tablets and various form and for Nokia X and for Windows Phone and for BlackBerry, but also for good reason, because the interesting thing is I think for the past 8 years or so, whenever there was industry predictions for the next year, it would be next year mobile is finally going to be really big. And then even though this has been predicted for the past 8 years or so, when it finally sunk in with everybody that mobile actually is really big, still everybody sort of went, oh, that changes everything that we are doing. So it's still a huge struggle for companies to adapt, but it's also a huge struggle for the tool sets to adapt to this. If I'm looking into my Google Analytics to see how a specific app is doing, I'm still seeing page views. And I'm going, but it's a native app. There are no pages. At the same time, there is absolutely no doubt that we need to very quickly move into a mobile-first strategy, because everything that we currently do on mobile, and this is why we do it on all of these platforms, is being eaten up by our audience. We actually have on mobile platforms that are a fraction of the amount of audience we have on a website. There's more media views, and there's more ad views, and there's more engagement from those users on those mobile apps. So right now we are building a ton of mobile apps, and we're just trying to feed it from that one central repository, which is where our editors are adding the new content, trying to unify it across those things. But I would be very happy to be able to do this on every kind of device in HTML5 in a way that actually gives you that kind of native experience. Right now, I don't really think we're there yet.
I think this could be the first time we disagree. Not the first time ever, but the first time in this panel. And has anybody here seen Saving Private Ryan? If you could raise your hand. And so I think my point here is that you need to think business first, or in Saving Private Ryan terms, it's win the war first. That's the big goal. And then it could be that it's tactically wise to defend that bridge, to hold this thing. But there's something inside me that's just very, very, turns upside down when we say a device before any other device. It's a little bit perhaps like here in Switzerland, if we said German first. I think it doesn't work like that. And so every time
This part is what's
in this part, yes. And so I think for me, it's, Eric Schmidt at Google said it a few years ago that the best developers think mobile first, and that might be the case for developers, but I think the best businesses, they think business goals first. And so there's something wrong there that I think we need to, look a little bit, below the surface on.
Do you want to respond to that first?
Well, my main question is, where is the disagreement exactly?
I think you said you're going mobile first, and I think I said that's a bad idea.
No, I'm saying that I would love for this to be everything
Microphone.
first. Everything first in a combined way. The reality of it is that we have choices to make, and we don't have one single way to deliver that experience across these platforms, which is surprising and somewhat disappointing. Which just means that it turns it into a bit of a struggle for now to achieve this. But to me, again, coming from this whole theoretical, beautiful world of complete separation of everything, this should be quite easy by now. And in reality, it's not at all. And we can blame it on the diversity of Android devices and all the different screen sizes. But if you open up one of the oldest web pages around that is in plain HTML with maybe some colors, somehow it's perfectly responsive and liquid, and it adapts to any kind of page size. So it's mostly that we've been way too distracted with getting all of this stuff produced in the first place that we forgot why those things were important, and now we have to sort of learn those back and actually manage to get everybody on the vendor sides on board with this as well and realize why this was important in the first place, and please, let's do it this way now. It's not too late, and we have to do it now.
The secret goal of every moderator in a panel is to induce disagreement and conflict. So it brings me to another springboard, if I might change gears a bit. Personalization is one of those areas that actually will invoke a lot of opinions. I myself have a degree of suggested privacy when I'm engaging with a brand. And then I find Amazon sometimes a bit creepy. It can find things that I don't think I want. From a marketer standpoint and a business standpoint, that's exactly what they hope to do. I'm sure many of you have already heard the story of the angry father who goes into a Target and complains to the manager that their 15-year-old daughter was receiving coupons for everything related to an upcoming pregnancy. This father was so angry and so upset that he yelled at the manager, called Target corporate, and it turns out that this young woman actually was, because of the profile that they had created for that buying experience from that single individual credit card. So personalization is one of the things that we are invested in because we believe that it can create a better web experience. There's no one face of a brand that you can actually give to everyone. So I'd like to spend some time on personalization, the sources of data. You could roll in big data to that, and your opinions, strategies, suggestions for the people that are architecting solutions that are personalized.
In 20 seconds or less. Okay. I was going to tell a joke about mobile first, but you'll have to ask me afterwards at the cocktail hour. So personalization. I always urge people to think in terms not of personalization, but of relevance. Because relevance is hard to object to. That is, if I, in some kind of interaction, but let's just say it's on a website for the sake of simplicity, I am provided in one way or another with the information, the content, the functionality that I need in order to quickly accomplish and happily accomplish the task that I have, whether that's booking a airline ticket or researching my summer vacation or whatever it is that I'm interested in accomplishing, without seeing all of the stuff that is irrelevant for me, that's a positive experience. And I might not even realize that the site owners have done something special in order to make that happen. I'm just going to think, wow, that was nice. It was fast. It was easy. It was convenient. It helped me do what I wanted to do. Rather than personalization, which I think of as something that almost has to be recognized. It's like, the stereotypical case is,
Sounds clinical.
Welcome back, Tim, right? Oh, now it's personalized. It's for me, right? And that's doesn't really serve any useful purpose either for the business directly, except they think personalization is somehow more engaging, and it doesn't serve any useful purpose for me as a consumer either, because now they know my name, so what? They're still serving me irrelevant content and information. So that's I think relevance is the goal, right? You can continue to call it personalization, but relevance is the goal, achieving relevance. And I'll just quickly say in terms of data, we talk at DCG, we didn't invent this term, but we talk a lot about small data rather than big data because it's cute. But what it really means is taking whatever you call your big data sources and whatever technologies you use in order to manage and massage that pool of big data, ultimately you want to get to the point where it's actionable, where you can say, okay, on the basis of these inputs, we should do X or Y to optimize this or that experience. And that's why we call it small, because it's understandable, it's comprehensible to the owners, the marketers, whoever it is, and they know what they should do on the basis of that input. And hopefully what they should do is something that's going to make that experience more relevant.
I have a good anecdote here that actually popped in my mind when we were talking about personalization. Anyone who uses Netflix and has kids will understand where I'm going to go here. But one of the things that's a really good example of bad personalization. So I use Netflix all the time. My grandparents use Netflix. Sometimes they use Netflix when they're at my house. I log into Netflix. I launch Netflix. Recommended for Mike. If it's not Dora and Diego and all these other things, because my daughter's been clicking
Fried green tomatoes.
Fried green tomatoes, or a really old detective show that was on that my dad sat down and watched for a while. And sure, does it say who's watching? It's Mike. But do you think my daughter's going to sit there and hit the plus sign and enter a new profile information at 8 years old? She doesn't care. She wants to watch Diego, and she wants to watch it as fast as possible. So I think personalization, when done right, and it's not in my face and it's not pushy, I agree with you. When it's relevant information and it's quick and it's efficient and it helps me achieve my goal without frustrating me, it's good. When it's personalized to the point that products are being shoved in my face, which Amazon can do sometimes, not so much, right? And I think there's a fine balance there, right? You look at the different browsers and the way that they handle them too. Chrome deals with things a certain way, and then you have Firefox with do not track capabilities, and there's opening private tabs, and it becomes a bit of a gong show being able to do things online lately. So I think it's going to be an ongoing struggle for a long time. But I agree with Tim. I think relevance is where the key is, and not overdoing it.
You have to disagree now, because otherwise...
Yes, I'll disagree with this and that. And I'll do it first by saying that I think, personalization is hard to disagree with. But if we take, a lens on it and look a little bit forward, I think when I look at something like what we have behind us, for me, this looks very much like 2012 or 2008 or perhaps even older. And I think if we look ahead, we need to have a more of a service approach to this, so that this is all different services. The CMS could be a service, the marketing thing could be a service, and it may be called something else in different years, but I think we need to have different services that we can plug into to create these personalized experiences. And Netflix is one case that certainly grew up, like the startup story earlier on. They didn't go to a class that day when the professor said you need to use a CMS to build a website. They don't use a CMS. And I think that's quite interesting to see how far they've taken that. And so the other thing I'll just say is that I think there's this big space in between websites that we've heard a lot about today and intranets. And in this big space in between those two, I'm increasingly seeing a lot of projects. 10 years ago, we would have called it extranets. Perhaps today it's called community management or the networked organization or my micros or whatever you have. And there's big gap there. If I was the chief vision officer, I would say there's a big gap in the market right there to create solutions that I think a lot of customers are asking for.
Yeah, I was mostly reminded of the fact that I personally tend to be quite annoyed with targeted ads because they make me realize how much of a geek I am. Because all of the ads I get on YouTube and elsewhere are for crazy egg and for web hosting and all of these things. And I was actually really, really proud that, because I sit there and watch this and I go, I have to get a life. And I finally got a targeted ad, which was for, in Dubai, there's a local used Ferrari dealer, and they decided to target me, and that was actually better than getting the Ferrari itself, to me.
For some reason, I got legal services when I visited your site. Why would that be?
I think the parents at Target were wondering the same thing, so you should probably be worried.
That's right.
But I think the second part of the story from the use case of Target is actually interesting as well, because it actually echoes exactly what you were saying. If it's not in your face, then it's great, because what Target then started doing is actually hiding the same kind of deals, but hiding it in between innocent stuff, so it doesn't really jump out of the page to you that much. I think for us as a media company, there's a huge difference between various ways of segmenting audiences and offering actually advertisers good value for money, which is very interesting to us, much more than non-paying visitors, to whom it mostly must not be interfering with their experience. At the same time, of course, there's many things where we personalize things, but personalization to me still has this sort of, like you say, the hi Adrian kind of thing, where it is one line on a page and it doesn't actually do anything for you. And the reality, of course, is that there's many services. If we have, I think currently we have something like 60,000 videos online on our VOD site. It's kind of nice to be able to save your playlist. And even if the suggestions aren't really working that well, and they're still working on this kind of functionality, we are really working on that kind of functionality as well. But that's not when you are going to mind that it says, hi Mike or hi Adrian, as long as it gets it right, because you're signed in and you've explicitly said you wanted this. At that stage, it's not creepy. So there are two very different sides to this for us. One is giving our audience what they want, functionality-wise, and just making it a better and more seamless experience for them. At the same time, the side where you monetize these things as an advertiser as well is where you have to be very careful that you're not creeping people out. Because if the same Ferrari ad would have said, hi Adrian, we heard you just got a bonus, come by to buy a Ferrari, that would have creeped me out.
Yeah. Well, I think this, if I'll take a moment to give my perspective, because like you, I'm actually a Magnolia customer. In my department, I've just been very freshly delivered to the European market space, but every day we're using Magnolia in our marketing group. And I will tell you that this diagram is absolutely spot on with our strategy for collecting more intelligent data, not creepy, not over detailed demographics of who visits our site, but actually understanding how people have a journey through the Magnolia brand. And we will implement personalization as a part of our strategy in the marketing department. We, in at least my department, will drink our own champagne. And fortunately, I have the luxury of being able to walk down the hall and say, hey, this isn't working as I expected, or my team's having a challenge with it. But even for a brand like Magnolia, who provides a community edition and a paid service and support, understanding the demographics of who visits our site, how they make the journey into the Magnolia brand, and then leveraging tools of which we don't develop. I mean, we're using Infusionsoft now for marketing automation, which replaced a previous tool. We're using Google Analytics in concert with other tools, and all of this we're validating, testing, using some of the new capabilities in 5.3 to really see if we're understanding the data correctly. But the diagram has relevance as organizations mature, but I think the honest answer is that there is no one solution, and we have to be flexible enough that I don't have to call a developer and I can implement a new tool and validate a new tool without having sort of a technical implementation specialist come in and do a test run. I need more intelligence, and I need my team to be able to accomplish that. So just real quick, I think we're getting close to time, and I want to offer the audience a chance to give us their perspective, ask some questions.
See you in church.